evening to everyone. I would like to thank Brother Matthew Saki for allowing me to preach his Wednesday night while he's gone, while he's in Sacramento. You're there in Ecclesiastes chapter number 10. The part of the chapter that I want to focus on is on verse number 2. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. And the title of my sermon this evening is Hold Your Heart with Your Right Hand. Hold your heart with your right hand. And the alternate title for this sermon is Hold Your Heart with the Right Hand. Hold your heart with the right hand. So my sermon will be focusing on why we need to hold our heart with our right hand. So before I would start my sermon, then please let me ask you, is there anybody who is left-handed right now in this service? So we don't have any left-handed. So my sermon is for you. Hold your heart in your right hand. So I want to explain to you this. I want to be first introducing why the Bible uses the right hand when it comes to holding, when it comes to a wise man. Because he said that the Bible says that a wise man's heart is in his right hand, and a fool's heart is at his left. So why we would use this symbolism here? Well, I believe that the Bible usually the Bible delivers the message in a general way. For example, so if you would notice, the Bible uses terms such as sons of God, referring to the saved individuals, but it's not just for men, but it also for women. But the Bible generally uses the term sons of God. So in this time, the Bible uses the right hand when it comes to being a wise man, because the Bible uses the right-handed man's perspective usually throughout all the Bible. So why would you explain that it uses the right-handed man's perspective? Well, if the Bible would explain the guy's, for example, if he's right-handed or he is left-handed, then he would explain to us specifically. For example, if you're in the book of Judges chapter number 3, verse number 15, the Bible says, "But when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up a deliverer, Ehud the son of Gera, a Benjamite, a man left-handed." And if you would turn to Judges chapter number 20, verse number 16, "Among all these people there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at an hairbreadth and not miss." So the Bible would explain this guy is a left-handed man and this kind of people are left-handed people, because the Bible would use the perspective of a right-handed man. That's why you have to explain that this guy is a left-handed. So make no mistake, the Bible would say to this. And what is interesting is that in Judges chapter number 3, verse number 15, and in Judges chapter number 20, verse number 16, both of those people are referring to the Benjamites. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but if you would see that, then it would be the Benjamites who are left-handed, and the guy named Ehud, he is a judge in Israel, so he is also a Benjamite. But we will not settle in that. So this sermon is but by the way, let me give you a caution for this. It is not just for the right-handed. So if you're left-handed, that means that this sermon is not for you. No. Okay? So the Bible uses the right-handed man's perspective. So if you're left-handed, then I do have this alternate sermon for you. So you hold your heart with the right hand. Okay, not your right hand, with the right hand. Okay. So why is that the Bible uses the right hand, and for being a wise person and being a foolish person with your left hand? Well, if you're right-handed, then your right hand is your stronger hand, right? So you know that if you're right-handed, for example, if you're playing basketball, then your shooting hand would be right hand, right? You can barely shoot with your left hand because that's not your strongest hand, and you can't hold something firmly with your left hand if you're right-handed. And if you're right-handed, then your left hand would be your weakest hand. So you can't hold something firmly. That's why he uses this term. A wise man's heart is in his right hand, because his right hand could hold his heart firmly. He could not let it go. But he would hold it with his left hand, then he would be shaking. He cannot hold it firmly. That's why he says, you will be a fool if you hold your heart in your left hand if you are a right-handed person, and vice versa. So my sermon will be focusing on this part. So why we need to hold our hand with our why we need to hold our heart with our right hand. So my sermon will be focusing this time is holding your heart with your right hand as a leader. So I will be focusing on a leader. So I will be using examples in the Bible with the people who are specifically leaders who didn't hold their heart with their right hand. But I'm not going to tell you that they're a foolish person, okay? Because obviously they're leaders, but there is some point in our lives that we can make foolish decisions, right? We can make foolish decisions. And these people did make foolish decisions during their lifetime. So turn, if you would, in Jeremiah chapter number 17, verse number 9. Jeremiah chapter 17, verse number 9. So why is it that we need to hold our heart with our right hand? Why we need to hold it with our strongest hand? Well, because in Jeremiah chapter number 17, verse number 9, the Bible reads, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?" So that's why you have to hold your heart with your right hand, means with your firm hold, because your heart is deceitful. And if you would turn to Matthew chapter number 12, Matthew chapter number 12, verse number 34. Matthew chapter number 12, verse number 34, the Bible reads, "O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh." See, the heart speaks because your mouth is, the mouth speaks because your heart is abundant of something. Say, if your heart is abundant of evil thoughts, then your mouth would speak your evil thoughts. That's why you really have to hold your heart, because if you can't control your heart, then eventually it will go to your mouth and eventually you would speak it out. That's why Jesus told them that you have to really hold your heart, because out of its abundance, then you would speak these blasphemous things or whatsoever evil thought that you're inside your heart. One popular example about these things, about holding your heart, is the worldly songs. If you're an unbeliever before, or if you got saved, then it's certainly that we used to sing these songs when we were still unbelievers, right? For example, this worldly song saying about following your heart, following what your heart tells you. And these people, these singers, are the most, the guys who didn't even follow what their heart says. And then eventually they're the ones who are committing fornication, they're the ones committing adultery with their wives. So they would tell you that, hey, you just follow your heart, and then eventually they're the ones who are doing these wicked things in their lives. So one example about this thing is the worldly music. See, we could remember all this worldly music. For example, in Tagalog, this song, "Kapag tumibok ang puso," right? It says, "Kapag tumibok ang puso, wala ka nang magagawa kundi sundin ito." That's the lyrics of the song, right? But eventually, we could still, we can do something, right? May magagawa tayo, okay? Para hindi natin masunod yung ating puso, it's kasi kaya natin siyang hawakan ng ating kanang kamay. Kasi ang ating kanang kamay is the firmest, the strongest hand that we have in these two, between the right hand and the left. So that's why we can do something, okay? So I'll be giving examples in the Old Testament of these leaders. Okay, these are prominent people that we almost deal every time. Okay, so we'll be starting about this guy named Moses. Okay, see Moses, one of the most famous characters in the Old Testament. So Moses, there is a one point in his life being a leader of the children of Israel, freeing them from the land of Egypt, bringing them into the land of Canaan, but somehow he didn't make it to the land of Canaan because he made this foolish thing in his life. So turn, if you would, in Numbers chapter number 20. Okay, Numbers chapter number 20. So in example of Moses, he didn't hold his right hand. So in this example, Moses just made a rash, foolish decision because he is under pressure. Okay, he is under pressure and not following God's instruction. So if you're there in Numbers chapter number 20, so the story is about in the waters of Meribah. But before we read the passage, I would read you from Numbers chapter number 12. Okay, Moses is a great leader, right? Moses is a great leader. Okay, so in Numbers chapter number 12, verse number 3, the Bible reads, "Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth." So Moses is the meekest man, okay, upon the face of the earth. So there's no question about it because the Bible tells us, okay? So if you're there in Numbers chapter number 20, so basically the children of Israel is in the wilderness, then they don't have water, okay? So they're asking Moses how they could drink water. So they're complaining at Moses every time, and Moses is telling it to God. So Moses is at all times under pressure in the children of Israel, because they always pressed him, he always urged him. For example, in Exodus chapter number 17, this verse number 4, the people would almost going to stone him and Aaron because people has no water. Okay, so he is under pressure, and sometimes when we are under pressure, we can make decisions, we can make foolish decisions, right? Without thinking about it. Because sometimes we're under pressure, we have so little time, and then we just make these rash decisions without thinking about it, and eventually we regret those decisions. So if you're there in Numbers chapter number 20, in verse number 11, the Bible reads, "And Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and water come out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also." Verse number 12, "And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, Because ye believe me not, sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them." So, if we are going to turn back with the story in verse number 8, God told him that he should be speaking unto the rock. God didn't told him to smote the rock. Okay, that's God's instruction in verse number 8. But Moses had this experience. So if you remember in Exodus chapter number 17, in the waters of Mara and Meribah, he did smote the rock, and the water gushed out of the rock. But in the second time, God told him, "Hey, you have to speak to the rock." That's God's instruction. But Moses, being under pressure, and he talked back with the people and said, and then he smote the rock. And now he smote the rock, the water gushed out. Eventually the water gushed out, but that's not the instruction that God gave him. And because of this, he was given this punishment that he will not bring the congregation into the land of Canaan. So eventually he only have to go up to the mount. So turn and view it in Numbers chapter number 27. Numbers chapter number 27. In verses number 12 and 14. Okay. Numbers chapter number 27, verse number 12 and 14. Up to 14. "And the Lord said unto Moses, Get thee up unto this mount, Abiram, and see the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. Now when thou hast seen it, thou also shalt be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron thy brother was gathered. For ye rebelled against my commandment in the desert of Sin, in the strife of the congregation, to sanctify me at the water before their eyes, that is the water of Meribah in Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin." So, by simply not following God's instruction, okay, he have this punishment with him that he will not enter into Canaan. Okay, his brother Aaron also died before him. Okay, he died early on, and Moses, before they could cross up to the land of Canaan, then God told him that he will be gathered unto thy people. So this is the consequence that Moses made, that Moses received. By not holding his hand, okay, he is under pressure, and then he didn't make the instruction given him by God. He didn't hold his heart, then he made this foolish decision of smiting the rock, and then when he smote the rock, then that made God angry with him, so he received this consequence. So that's why it is important for us to hold our heart with our right hand, because sometimes when we are under pressure, we make these foolish decisions in our life. So let's move on to the next guy who didn't hold his hand with his, he don't hold his heart with his right hand. So this is the most famous example of a guy, because Moses is a leader, right? But this guy is a king in the name of Solomon. Okay, so turn if you would. Okay, to turn if you would in 1 Kings chapter number 11. Okay, 1 Kings chapter number 11, starting in verse number 1. So this guy, David. Okay, David was the king, and then his son Solomon inherits the kingdom. Okay, so this guy Moses, he didn't hold his heart with his right hand, But he is the only one who was affected by his own decision, by his own action. He's the only one because he's the only guy who suffered this consequence of not going through the land of Canaan. Okay, he's only his himself. Okay, but this Solomon, this guy, okay, this is a big consequence to him. Okay, so you're there in 1 Kings chapter number 11, verse number 1. The Bible reads, "But King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughters of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites." So Solomon, in the end of his life, he loved many women. Okay? Not just an ordinary Israelite or a lady from the tribe of Judah or something within Israel, but these are the daughters of the land. See, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, Sidonians, and the Hittites. And these are the people, the Hittites, these are the people that God told them that you should not give your sons to their daughters, nor you take your daughters to your sons. And even God told them specifically that they have to eradicate all these people. All that breathed, God said that they should exterminate it because the land vomited out these people because of the wickedness of these people. Okay, the Hittites specifically. Okay, but Solomon, in the end of his life, he loved many strange women. So why is that? So you're there in 1 Kings chapter number 11. Okay, you just have to move for the next verses. 1 Kings chapter number 11. Okay, in verse number 3 to 4, the Bible reads, okay, sorry, I was in 2 Kings. 1 Kings chapter number 11, okay. Verse number 3 to 4, "And he had 700 wives, princes, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart." So his wives turned away his heart. But look at the number. He has 700 wives and princes and 300 concubines. Okay, so he gathered a lot of these women. Okay, and then in verse number 4, "For it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David." So basically, okay, turn if you would in Ecclesiastes chapter number 2. So he didn't, he loved these strange wives. Okay, so basically he's the king. So you're seeing all this beautiful lady in the street. So he's just in love with all these every other lady he could see also, because he has these 700 wives. Okay. So you only have 360 days, 365 days and 1/4 days a year. So basically you have 7, and so how you have to deal with them. So maybe he's doing it by hour or half a day, but still you won't compass it because you still have 300 concubines. Okay, okay. So this is the one that is a really big sin. In Ecclesiastes chapter number 2, you're there in Ecclesiastes chapter number 2, verses 10 to 11, okay, the Bible reads, "And whatsoever mine eyes," this is in Ecclesiastes, so Solomon wrote the book Ecclesiastes, and he said, "And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked in all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun." He himself, okay, he himself admitted it, that there was no profit in what did he done. Okay, and in 2 Kings chapter number 20, you don't have to turn there. Verse number 23, verse 13, "And the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the mount of corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had built it for Ashtaroth, the abomination of the Sidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile." Okay, and also it is not just that Solomon made these groves for these gods, strange god of his wife. Okay, the Bible also mentions, okay, that he caused the children of Israel to worship because he is the leader, right? He is the king. Now, if the people says that you're doing this thing, then obviously the people of the land would follow what you are doing. So if you're there in 1 Kings, if you're still in the 1 Kings, it's still in chapter number 11, then turn if you would in verse number 33. 1 Kings chapter number 11, verse number 33. Because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashereth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways to do all that which is right in my eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgment as did David his father. So he caused this all the children of Israel to worship these strange gods, and that's why what is the consequence of what he did? Okay, so turn if you would in 1 Kings chapter number 11. You're still there. Okay, in verses number 29 to 31. What is the consequence of this? In verse number 29, and it came to pass that at the time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and they two were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him, and rent it in 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, Behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. So basically, the whole kingdom of Israel was split. Okay, the 10 tribes go to the northern kingdom of Israel, and the remaining 2 tribes went still and became the southern kingdom of Judah. So basically, that's Judah and Benjamin and some of the rest parts of the tribe of Levi. So that's the consequence. He sinned within himself, and he made this really big consequence for the children of Israel, that their kingdom would be split into half. Okay, and this thing that Solomon failed in the latter part of his life, it is not a thing that we as New Testament believers only have seen. Okay, it is also being witnessed in the time of their captivity. So turn if you would in Nehemiah chapter number 13. Okay, this is a story. Okay, in Nehemiah chapter number 13, verse number 26. So in Nehemiah chapter number 13, verse number 26, the Bible reads, Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, even him did outlandish woman cause to sin. So Solomon is a guy, is in the book of Proverbs, in the Ecclesiastes. He is a really smart guy, right? But when you have this outlandish woman with you, then eventually you'll become foolish, right? Why is that? Because he didn't hold his heart with his right hand. Maybe he's just seeing all these women and just allowing them to pass through his eyes, and eventually he admitted it that he didn't withhold his heart, whatever his heart desires. Okay? So it is really important for us as leaders. That's why I'm focusing on the leader in this sermon, that we hold our hand with we hold our heart with our right hand, because you don't know what will happen to you. Okay, we see all these kings fall. We even see these things happen in our lifetime right now. We see leaders, church leaders, fall because of sin. Why? Because they don't hold their heart with their right hand. They don't hold it firmly. They hold it loosely. Okay, so that's the next guy. Okay, he didn't even he is not only the one who was affected by this consequence. He even took the whole kingdom of Israel with him, that was split into 2. So now we're going to progress. The third guy that we'll be talking this evening is about a judge. He is a judge. Now, first Moses is a leader, and then Solomon is a king. And then before the kings, then we have this called the system of the judges in Israel. So we're going to talk about this guy. I know you have heard of his name. He's called Jephthah. Okay, the guy named Jephthah. Okay. So Solomon, okay, giving to self whatsoever it desires, and Moses, okay, didn't following God's instruction. But this guy Jephthah, he didn't rip the consequence 100%, but his loved one received the consequence, okay, because of making these unnecessary vows. Okay, he made this unnecessary vows. So turn if you would in the book of Judges. Okay. Judges chapter number 11, verses 29 and 31. Judges chapter number 11, verses 29 and 31, the Bible reads, Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he passed over Gilead and Manasseh, and passed over Mizpah of Gilead. And from Mizpah of Gilead he passed over to the children of Ammon. And Jephthah vowed a vow unto the Lord, and said, so this is the vow, if thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into mine hands, then it shall be that whatsoever cometh forth of the doors of my house to meet me, when I return in peace from the children of Ammon, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. So this is his vow to God. Okay, so they're going to battle, okay, against the children of Ammon. So if you would remember, the children of Ammon accused the children of Israel of taking their land, but the truth is not that the children of Israel didn't take their land at all. Okay, but they're accusing them. So this guy Jephthah, he is mentioned in the Bible. He is a son of a harlot. Okay, he's son of a harlot, and then his brothers have nothing. They don't want to fellowship with him, so basically they threw him away. Okay, he fled in the land of Tob. But when they are, the children of Ammon would go to their land, okay, Manasseh, Gilead, then the elders of the city then took him in the land of Tob, and they said that if Jephthah would lead them, okay, would lead them, so if he could be their captain. So maybe his heart was lifted a little up, okay, so wait, I'm just a son of a harlot, and then now you're fetching me here in the land of Tob to be your leader. So maybe his heart was quite lifted up, and then he made this rash vow unto the Lord, that whatsoever cometh forth of the doors of his house to meet him, then he will give it as a burnt offering. Okay, so that's the vow that he made. Okay, so maybe he made this out of the joy in his heart. But sometimes people says that we should not make huge decisions when we are happy. Okay, because sometimes we always make these decisions and eventually, okay, we regret this decision. For example, okay, we'll have this example of an unsaved guy named Herod, right? So he's happy, okay, the lady danced before him and he made this, so whatsoever you would ask me, then I will give you, even to the half of my kingdom. Then the lady asked for the head of John the Baptist. But Herod would not do it because he feared John the Baptist. Maybe he just wanted to keep him in the prison. He never intended to cut off his head, but he made this foolish vow to the lady, so he just have to follow his vow. Okay, and this is what happened to Jephthah. Okay, so turn if you would in Deuteronomy chapter number 23. So if we'll be making a vow unto the Lord, then we have to basically fulfill the vow, because in Deuteronomy chapter number 23, verses number 21, and up to verse number 23, the Bible reads, when thou shalt vow a vow unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it, for the Lord thy God will surely require it of thee, and it would be sin in thee. But if thou shalt forbear to vow, it shall be no sin in thee, the which is gone out of thy lips. Thou shalt keep and perform even a freewill offering, according as thou hast vowed unto the Lord thy God, which thou hast promised with thy mouth. So if you vowed a vow unto the Lord, then you ought to perform it. That's why Jephthah made this harsh vow to the Lord. So what's the story next? So in Judges chapter number 11, you're still there in Judges chapter number 11. So let's continue the story. Okay, in verse number 34 up to verse number 36, the Bible reads, and Jephthah came to Mizpah unto his house. So basically they subdued the children of Ammon. Okay, and then so he won this battle, and he says, and Jephthah came to Mizpah unto his house, and behold, his daughter came out to meet with timbrels and with dances. And she was his only child. So take note of that part of the verse. She was his only child. Beside her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass, when he saw her, that he rent his clothes and said, alas, my daughter, thou hast brought me very low, and thou art one of them that trouble me, for I opened my mouth unto the Lord, and I cannot go back. And she said unto him, my father, if thou hast opened thy mouth unto the Lord, do to me according to that which hath proceeded out of thy mouth, for as much as the Lord had taken vengeance for thee of thine enemies, even all the children of Ammon. Okay. So every time I would go through my Bible in the Old Testament, this is the saddest story I've always thinking to myself, why this thing have to happen? Why this thing have to happen? Because it's sad. She is his only daughter, and then he have to be, basically, she has to be a burnt offering because her dad made a rash vow unto the Lord. See, this thing of making the vow unto God, see, that thing is unnecessary because God is using Jephthah with the might of God. Okay, He is not using this for a show of him because Jephthah is really a really good guy. He is a strong man. God is using Jephthah to show unto the people God's glory. That's why for us, we could apply this to us as New Testament believers that we didn't have to make this vow unto God. Okay, I will make this vow unto God so that He would help me. Okay, to be a better soul winner. Does that thing works? No. God uses the mean people of this world, even those guys who can't even utter a word, to show His glory unto the world, right? So this thing of making vows, so let's turn if you would in Matthew chapter number 5. So this thing of making vows, these unnecessary vows, is the thing that also God mentioned in the New Testament. Jesus mentioned it in Matthew chapter number 5. See, in Matthew chapter number 5, verses 33 and 37, the Bible reads, starting in verse number 3 again, ye have heard that it had been said by them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is His footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King, neither shalt thou swear by thy head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black, but let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. See, you don't have to swear, but if you will eventually going to swear, then you eventually have to perform your oath. Okay? So that is this thing. Jephthah didn't object it. Obviously, he feels sad about it. He said that he said to his daughter, thou hast brought me very low, but eventually his daughter had to suffer this thing of being a burnt sacrifice because her dad made this vow unto the Lord. See, this story is sad, but this reminds us that we have to really hold our heart with our right hand. We hold it fixed, hold it strong, because we could utter these words, right? We could utter these words that eventually these foolish things that we utter that eventually we would regret in later in our lives. See, so what's the application of this thing? So why we need to have to hold our heart with our right hand? Okay, I'm talking with this evening about the leaders. Okay, specifically the leaders. See, we see this thing about in churches, like we have these leaders, right? In our church, we have our evangelists, but we have our sending pastor. And in our former churches, where you were from, you see this pastor sometimes make these mean decisions, right?
Right.
When you say, oh, his decision is really mean, I could make a better decision. But you have to really understand to yourselves that the leaders, they are the ones who should be mean. Okay? You have to understand why they're mean, because they are the ones who really understand this passage. They know how to hold their heart with their right hand. Okay? They always try to say no in the front of your face. Okay? They always reject you. Why? Because they know that if you would just accept all your suggestions, then eventually something will happen and something will regret it. That's why pastors, they're the ones who are really firm on this thing of holding their heart with their right hand. See, in ordinary people like us who are ordinary members, then we would hear something and somebody tells us, they would just accept their suggestions, right? But the pastor sometimes, he really tells you, no, we're not doing that, because they know to themselves that this thing of following your heart is not a thing that we should always do. That's why we really hold our heart really firm and not allow our left hand hold our heart, so that we cannot make these vain decisions. So why? So why is that? Okay. So turn if you would in James chapter number 1. So we're going to the New Testament. Okay. In James chapter number 1, verse number 19. James chapter number 1, verse number 19, the Bible reads, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. So sometimes we hear these things and then we just rashly talk back. Okay? We rush to make these decisions, but the Bible says, yeah, you should be swift to hear, but somehow you have to be slow to speak and also slow to wrath. So if you're slow to speak, that means that you're holding your heart. You're not talking 100% of what's in your heart, because you're limiting the things that you only want to say, you want to talk about. Okay? And also, by the result of that, you'll be slowing down, and becoming anger. Okay? That's why he says you're slow to wrath. For example, practical example about this is in going soul winning, right? Because we sometimes run into these people who are atheists, and there are sometimes who are really arrogant people who tells us that it seems like they're more knowledgeable than with the Bible, when they only read the verse out of context. And sometimes it's really tempting to talk back, right? It's really tempting to talk back, but somehow you have to really hold your heart with your right hand. Because sometimes we end up in trouble, and sometimes we end up hardening people's heart. That somehow maybe we could even get saved because, but eventually we didn't made it, because somehow they're hard-hardened because we talk back, and also because we made their heart, we're the ones who made their heart to become harder to talk about, and also to accept the gospel. That's one of the practical applications. And also, Christ made an example for this thing. Okay, Christ showed himself in 1 Peter. So turn up the word in 1 Peter. Okay. So Christ even made himself as an example for this thing. Okay? Okay. In 1 Peter chapter number 2, verse number 23, the Bible reads, "When he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously." So Jesus Christ, when he was reviled, he didn't even talk back. Okay? He is so focused on fulfilling, okay, in saving us. Well, when he was reviled, he could even answer a little bit, but he didn't make it. Okay, if you read the Gospels, then if you have ever read what people are telling him about him, they said he saved others, he himself cannot save. But Jesus didn't even dare to answer them. Why? Because he holds his heart with his right hand, and also he is really focused on his mission, and that's saving the whole humanity and being a sacrifice for all sins. So to close in this, turn if you would in 1 Corinthians chapter number 10. So what's the application of this? So you may say, I don't even hold a position in this church. I'm not even a deacon. I'm just an ordinary church member. Or you may say, I am not a leader. But let me ask you this. Are you a father? Or are you a husband, a mother? Okay. Do you have younger siblings? Okay. And this is the most important point. Do you have some other persons look to you? Sometimes this thing of other person looking to us, this is not an open thing that we know. Okay. Sometimes people just look to this guy because he sees him as his standard that he could fulfill in the church. And sometimes when we don't hold our heart with our right hand, we make these foolish decisions, and eventually all these people is looking to you as an example. Also, you have made him discouraged because of the decisions that what we are doing in our life. So in 1 Corinthians chapter number 10, verse number 11 up to 13, so why is it necessary that we hold our heart with our right hand? Well, the Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter number 10, verses 11 to 13. Now all these things happened unto them for examples. So these things that happened in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, these things are examples for who? And they are written for our admonition. So these things are written for our admonition. Okay, that story of Moses, the story of Solomon, the story of Jephthah, and all these things, they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore, that him that thinketh he standeth, take heed lest he fall. Okay? I don't care if you're a pastor, care if you're somebody who read your Bible multiple times, but you have to take heed lest you fall. Because we see these examples, okay? We see these examples take place in our real lives. That's why we have to be really careful about this thing. Because why? There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. So all men, saved or unsaved, all goes through this kind of temptation. Okay? But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. So what's the purpose of this thing? You have to hold your heart with your right hand, means with your strongest hand, so that you will not fall to the temptation, you will not fall to these things we have read in the Old Testament, so that we will be able to follow God's precepts, and we also to at the end of our life as Christian lives, we can say that we are victorious, right? We didn't ever fall. Obviously, we fall from time to time. But sometimes, if we make these stupid decisions in our lives, then it's the end of our Christian lives. We can never go back. We can never go back in track. That's why it is important to hold our heart with our right hand. Let's close with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this opportunity that you've given me this evening to preach in our midweek service. Lord, thank you so much for your word that we have studied this evening. Lord, I pray that you would just help us to hold our heart with our right hand, Lord, so that we will not make these mistakes that the people which we had written in the Bible, in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament, Lord. Lord, I pray that you would help each and every one of us to look